What truly happened to gospel icon Ron Winans? To millions, he was the warm, reassuring voice of one of gospel music's most cherished families. But beyond the radiant smiles, the heartfelt worship, and the stage lights, there were battles he carried alone. Struggles no microphone ever captured. His unexpected passing in 2005 left the world stunned, grieving, and searching for answers that never fully came. Was it only illness, or were there deeper struggles beneath the surface? Today, we pull back the curtain on the quiet pain, unwavering faith, and unseen moments that shaped the final chapter of a man who forever changed gospel music. Ron Winans was not just a singer, his voice became a lifeline for those clinging to hope. But behind the breathtaking harmonies and award-winning albums was a deeply human story, one marked by private suffering and emotional weight that continued to echo long after the applause faded. In this story, we are not simply remembering his accomplishments. We are stepping into the hidden spaces of his life, the health battles he tried to endure silently, the emotional toll fame placed on him, and how his passing rippled through the Winans family in ways fans never knew. But before we reach the heartbreak, we must first understand where his journey began. Long before the sold-out concerts and Grammy celebrations, he was just Ronald Winans, the second of 10 children born to David and Dolores Winans, known lovingly as Mom and Pop. Their Detroit household wasn't ordinary. It was a sanctuary of prayer, discipline, and unwavering faith. Music wasn't just performed there, it breathed through the walls. Each day, gospel filled the air as Mom Winans guided worship with grace, and Pop Winans taught commitment and humility. From a young age, Ron's voice carried a depth that felt older than he was, as if his heart understood pain and hope before life had taught him either. Detroit's gospel scene in the 1970s was powerful, but when Ron joined his brothers Marvin, Carvin, and Michael to form a group, something remarkable emerged. Their harmonies were smooth, rich, and soulful. Something new, something unforgettable. Word spread quickly. Their sound didn't just move crowds, it changed them. When gospel legend Andrea Crouch discovered them, he recognized greatness rising. He guided their sound, opened doors to the industry, and forever altered the direction of their lives. In 1981, their debut album, Introducing the Winans, reshaped gospel itself, melding timeless faith with a fresh, contemporary voice that reached across generations. And with success came expectations. The Winans family became the very definition of gospel excellence. Audiences saw perfection, humility, grace, but Ron carried the weight of that legacy quietly. Behind the polished performances lived a man trying to navigate faith, purpose, and the emotional cost of being a vessel for others' healing. And that is where the story turns. Even as Ron's career reached remarkable heights, he never drifted from the roots that shaped him. He remained devoted to his family, his church, and the faith that had carried him since childhood. He often said that fame fades, but a life anchored in God lasts forever. Yet the same deep sense of responsibility that made him beloved also weighed heavily on him. Ron gave constantly, his time, his compassion, his creativity, always making room for the needs of others while quietly placing his own well-being last. By the mid-1990s, he wasn't just admired as a gifted vocalist, he had become a respected producer and mentor. His visionary project, Ron Winans Family and Friends, united some of the most powerful voices in gospel music and produced worship that felt both intimate and triumphant. During this season, many noticed Ron's growth, not only as an artist, but as a man who had learned to find peace through hardship. But beneath that growing wisdom lived a struggle he chose not to speak of. The first signs of declining health appeared softly. Small moments of fatigue, short breaths after performances, canceled appearances that raised quiet concern. Still, Ron pushed forward, determined not to let sickness interrupt his calling. And that determination came with a price. While the world saw strength, grace, and passion on stage, behind closed doors he was fighting a battle that weighed heavily both physically and emotionally. Those close to him saw how quickly his energy could fade, how he sometimes leaned heavily on faith just to finish a performance. Ron had always been private about his personal life, especially his health. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't want anyone to worry. He certainly didn't want to distract from the message of the music he offered. But the warnings grew harder to ignore. Doctors eventually confirmed heart complications, news that devastated those who knew how much Ron lived to worship. To hear that the very organ which carried his voice and breath was failing was heartbreaking, and yet Ron did not retreat. He prayed harder. He leaned into God more deeply. His interviews from that time reflected a man who had made peace with vulnerability, "I am not afraid of what I face," he said, "because I know who holds my tomorrow." His condition worsened, and he was placed on the waiting list for a heart transplant, a waiting game filled with fear, prayers, and unspoken anxieties. But even in pain, Ron continued to serve, mentor, sing when he could, and lift others higher. In 1997, the miracle came. Ron received a heart transplant that breathed new life into him. For a time, it felt like a victory story written by God's own hand. He returned to the stage with renewed strength, recording again, laughing again, praising again, and his family and friends series blossomed, featuring gospel greats like Donnie McClurkin, Vanessa Bell Armstrong, and of course his own siblings, reminding the world that Ron Winans' gift was not just his voice, but the way he brought hearts together. Even after his recovery, Ron understood that life after a transplant was not a simple return to normal. It meant daily medication, constant monitoring, and a body that had to relearn strength. Yet through it all, gratitude overshadowed every ache. He spoke boldly in churches and interviews about God's mercy, thanking him for allowing more time to serve. Ron became a living testimony of endurance and faith, offering encouragement to others facing sickness and uncertainty. But in the years that followed, complications slowly resurfaced. The constant medication and the relentless pace of ministry began to wear down his body. Family and friends noticed how exhaustion sometimes overtook him, how breathing grew heavy, and how he often pushed himself far beyond his physical limits. Yet giving up was never an option for Ron. Those who worked with him recall moments when he entered rehearsal, leaning on pure determination, singing through weakness with a strength that came from somewhere deeper than muscle or breath. "God's not finished with me yet," he would say, anchoring himself in faith even when his body faltered. As his struggles intensified, Ron spent more time with his family, especially his parents. The Winans' home became a sanctuary again, filled with prayer, whispered hope, tears, and worship. His siblings surrounded him with love, each song and prayer strengthening him in ways medicine could not. But by 2005, his condition took a drastic turn. Hospital visits increased, and the battle grew harder. Those who walked with him through those final months described them as both deeply painful and unbelievably sacred. Ron's faith did not diminish. It shined even brighter. He spoke of rest, heaven, peace, and being ready when God called. He had given everything, his voice, his compassion, his life, to sharing hope. He refused to let illness steal his purpose. And then, when the world least expected it, the storm did not pass. News of Ron's passing at just 48 years old shook the gospel community to its core. Tributes poured in, churches wept, and artists paused in reverence. Yet behind the public mourning was a family grieving a son, a brother, a light. Through the early months of 2005, those closest to Ron could feel the decline. Years of medical battles had taken their toll, though Ron never let it show. He continued to smile, to uplift, to love. His final weeks were spent in and out of the hospital, his family faithfully at his side. Even then, he prayed with nurses, sang softly through pain, and reminded everyone near him that God was still good. His brother, Pastor Marvin, said Ron carried a peace that could only come from heaven. He did not fear death. He understood his work was complete. In one of his final hospital stays, the Winans gathered around him, singing, reading scripture, and holding his hands. Those present described that room not as a place of sorrow, but as a sanctuary. Machines hummed, tears fell, and yet the air felt holy. Ron, though weakened, would raise his hand in worship. And in that sacred moment, it became clear. He was ready to go home. He had made peace with his journey long before his final breath. The man who spent his life guiding others toward God was now quietly preparing to meet him face to face. On June 17, 2005, the gospel world was shaken by the news that Ron Winans had passed away in Detroit, surrounded by those who loved him most. Shockwaves moved quickly across churches, choirs, and stages nationwide. Tributes poured in as artists, pastors, and countless fans shared memories of how his voice had carried them through their darkest nights. For the Winans family, who had stood together in ministry for decades, this loss cut deeper than any before. They had celebrated triumphs together, supported each other in storms, but now they were forced to say goodbye to one of their own. When it came time to honor his life, the funeral became a historic moment in gospel music. One of overwhelming sorrow and overwhelming love. Held in Detroit, the sanctuary overflowed with iconic voices: Kirk Franklin, Yolanda Adams, Donnie McClurkin, CeCe Winans, and many others who had been touched by Ron's spirit. Each person spoke not merely of his vocal gift, but of his humility, tenderness, and unwavering devotion to God. The service was filled with worship that seemed to rise straight into heaven. Songs that once brought joy now soaked the church in tears. Grief and gratitude met in the same breath. Pastor Marvin Winans delivered one of the most emotional sermons of his life, gently reminding everyone that Ron was not lost. He had simply gone home. Fans around the world mourned deeply. Letters, testimonies, and messages flooded the family, many saying that Ron's voice had been their comfort in seasons of heartbreak. His music suddenly carried new weight. People were no longer just hearing songs. They were hearing a life poured out. Gospel stations across the nation played his classics in rotation. Restore Me Again, Everything You Touch is a Song, Who's in the House? And every lyric felt like a farewell wrapped in faith. For the Winans family, the days after his passing were filled with reflection and quiet remembrance. CeCe Winans shared that losing Ron felt like losing a pillar, yet she held to the belief that his mission had been fulfilled. Ron lived with purpose, she said. He gave every part of himself to God, and now he is resting. Even years later, those who knew Ron speak of him with a soft reverence. They recall his laugh, his kindness, the way his presence brought peace. He was the kind of man who encouraged others even when he was hurting, who chose joy even when carrying a burden. His life became proof that true faith is not avoiding pain, it is finding God in the middle of it. The Winans family continued to honor him through ministry, worship, and legacy building. Marvin's Perfecting Church held yearly tributes. Younger Winans artists carried the torch, shaping contemporary gospel with the sincerity Ron embodied. His passing sparked conversations about health, vulnerability, and spiritual endurance in the gospel community, encouraging many to share their own hidden battles. Over time, Ron Winans became more than a beloved singer. He became a symbol of grace under suffering, humility under pressure, and faith that does not break. His voice is still echoing, his story is still teaching, his legacy is still living, and for every heart his music ever touched, Ron never truly left.